Heyo! This is a intro video on how I move the equipment around the back of the restaurant. So people ask me all the time how I get all the brewing equipment into the kitchen area, and the short answer is I have to push it all together pretty tight. So anytime I want to do anything with the beer or access these tanks, I have to completely move everything out, but it's not too bad. It only takes about 5 minutes, and I get a little sweat on, so that's nice. Alright, we're here at the brewery. I don't think I've done a video on YouTube yet about the setup, so now's a good time. Over here is my glycol chiller. This is a refrigeration unit that keeps a solution of glycol at a specific temperature, cold, so that it pumps through these lines. Pumps through these lines into the tanks and recirculates around the tanks as needed to keep them at their set temperature. So over here we've got BBT number 2. That's bright barrel tank number 2. This is a 4-barrel tank. Currently it has only about 1.5 barrels of beer in it. This is the 10-degree pale lager, and it is set at 30. It actually might be set at 36 degrees. I can't remember. No, 38. So it's set at 38, and it's staying cold. And the process that I wanted to show today is how to fill a keg off of a tank. So let's get into that. In goes the Sani-Clean. Yum. Alright, so to fill a keg I need a coupler, clamp, gasket, and a small little beer washer. So now I'm going to sanitize the hose that will fill it by creating a siphon. I've filled this hose up with water already. Dip that end into the sanitizer, and then I'm going to let this end create a siphon and flow out. Let's go. Take 2. There we go. Wait for the air pockets to go through, and there's that. Then I'll dip it back in there. I'll let that all sanitize for a few minutes. Alright, so the joys of doing a YouTube channel and recording is you learn about angles and stuff. So I just filmed this whole setup, and everything was cut off. So what I did was I attached the threaded beer nut end of this fill hose, the sanitized fill hose, with that little beer washer gasket in between these two couplings to the fill side of this Sankey D Micromatic coupler. I attached the other end of this hose with the tri-clamping gasket to the bottom of this bright tank. I cracked this little valve to allow any liquid to flow through, and then open the bottom of this bright tank so that beer could push out all the sanitizer and any air pockets. And so I have a pocket right here that looks like an air pocket, but it's actually just CO2 that is broken out. But just to show you an example, I would crack that, and it would purge the sanitizer out as it's being chased with beer. So now we're ready to fill a keg. So I've got a keg right here that is sanitized and cleaned and everything, and I'm going to spray the top of the fitting on the keg itself. You want to make sure anytime that you couple or fill a keg that coupler itself is disengaged. So like that, and just like that, it'll just spray beer in your face, and that's no good. So I am going to tighten that screw up. Seems like that screw is a little loose. Feel it it'll turn in just in my hand. All right, so disengage that, and then I'm going to engage the coupler on the keg. When I engage this, I'll then determine how much CO2 pressure is inside of the keg by, well, this is leaking, so I'm gonna tighten that. Something adjustment like that, you just want to make sure that you're putting any beer that's in there, just because it could have been a dry sponsor and not that beer. So now that that's tightened up, I'm going to re-engage the coupler on the keg, and then I'm going to crack this to see how much pressure is in the keg itself. It's pretty low, so I'm going to save any pressure that's in here and let the beer fill. The way that a keg works is there's a dip tube, there's a spear that's inside of the keg, it goes all the way to the bottom. So when you attach a keg to a draft system, CO2 comes in through this inlet, pressurizes the beer from the top, and pushes it up through the bottom of the keg out into the draft line. Filling a keg is the exact reverse. So you're going to be filling beer through the spear that goes into the bottom of the keg, and it'll be releasing pressure, CO2 pressure, as it fills from the bottom. So as the level comes up, more pressure is created, so you need to bleed that off as you're filling. So I'm going to go ahead and open this and see, make sure my flow rate is positive into the keg. Sometimes you will have, and this is filling pretty quickly, so this keg was, I think I bled too much CO2 pressure off of it earlier. So I'm going to let that fill up and equilibrate to where the pressure in here is the same as the pressure in the tank, and that way it doesn't foam. You want these pressures to be as close to each other as possible when you're filling, because the CO2, you want the beer to stay as carbonated as it is in this vessel, and so you want those pressures to be balanced so that CO2 doesn't break out of solution. So I'm going to let this equilibrate. You can kind of feel the side of the keg to see where the fill is, because the liquid in there is 38 degrees and this keg is not super chilled right now. So I can tell that my beer level is about down here at 1/4 of the way full. That tells me that we're probably balanced on the pressure side of things. So I'm going to crack this slightly to relieve some of that pressure. It'll make a hissing noise. And then this is bleeding off pressure, and this beer level will continue to rise over the course of like 6 minutes or so, maybe a little faster. So I guess we'll just let that go. Oh, one other thing, just for sound quality, I have my CO2 tank. My bulk CO2 tank is over here. It's sitting at about 13 psi. It should be set at like 12-ish or whatever. So I'll turn that down a little bit. It's coming out of this CO2 hose, and it is going into the blow-off valve of this tank. So it's pressurizing this tank, or keeping pressure on this tank as we're filling the keg, so that we don't just like bleed off all of the pressure that's on this tank, and we get even consistent flows throughout the whole process. So I'm going to crack this back open, and I will wait for this keg to finish filling, and we'll be back. All right, so whenever the keg fills up, it'll start spraying beer out like that. It means it's completely full. You'll shut the CO2 valve, shut the beer line, and then you'll decouple the keg. I've already sanitized this other keg, but just give it a spray for demonstration purposes. Don't worry about this little guy. I don't even know what that is. It's like some sort of varnish or something, but I will decouple the keg, couple it onto this second keg, engage that coupler, do the same process where I bleed, kind of see how much CO2 is in there. That's still pretty low, and then I will open my beer line. It'll begin to fill, kind of judge the flow by the vibration. It's flowing in there pretty quick. So again, this keg is a little bit slightly carbonated, pressurized, and I will just crack this a tiny bit so that I can have a nice low, slow, high pressure fill. So I'll come back when that one's done, and we'll wrap things up with the third keg. All right, so here's the fun part of emptying a bright beer tank. So the level is, there's the one up there, so halfway you would assume is a half barrel, but and sorry, I guess I didn't specify each of these kegs are a half barrel. So if that's one half, two halves is one barrel, and then another half barrel is 1.5 barrels, which is what the level of the tank was. When you get to the bottom of the tank, the dish, just due to the geometry, is much less volume than the straight portion of the tank. So that last bit, even though it kind of looks like it's, a third of a barrel volumetrically on the sight glass, that's probably like a sixth or even less, because it's gonna funnel down to the small surface area of that, or not surface area, but that small volume in the cone or the dish. So just a consideration, you got to watch that as you're filling the last keg, because it'll go down real quick, and then you don't want to blast the keg with all the yeast and particulate that may have settled down to the bottom of the tank. So, oh, and there it goes. So, all right, so this is a fun part of it that filled quicker than I expected, but like I was just explaining, that portion that's left is such a small volume that I'm going to just I'm going to grab another keg and just kind of like top a keg off, because that's not even going to fill a 6-barrel. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, just wanted to give an update on that. You don't want to blast the last keg with all that yeast. You want to cut it off before all the CO2 and yeast and stuff starts flowing through the line. So cheers. All right, so I'm filling this last keg. I just wanted to show you how quickly that level kind of goes down. You kind of draw a line from the level over to the spot on the dish. You can see where it'll start to head towards the bottom, that output, and there it goes. Yep, that's crazy, right? So, watching the bubbles in there, you just want to make sure that you're not blasting that into the keg, and so cut it off before that happens. Sorry, that was super quick and weird, but just wanted to make sure you saw that. What's up? Little change of scenery out here. This is a beautiful day here in Texas. Just wanted to get out and ride around as I was editing this video and realized I didn't have any more footage of actually stuff going on in the brewery, so just wanted to do a little wrap-up segment here. So after I filled that keg, the black keg, which is a quarter barrel, that was probably a quarter full, so not too many, it was probably like a gallon or two, so not too much beer was left inside of that dish. Once you get done filling, after I showed that CO2 kind of blasting the rest of the beer through the line, you want to shut that off before any of that gets into the keg, just so that you don't have any, yeast particulate or CO2 rousing up the beer that's inside of the keg. So you turn the valve off on both the CO2 and the beer line, disconnect the coupler, and then you can 100% make sure that the bottom of the serving vessel or bright tank, which I kind of use those words interchangeably because the previous brewery that I worked at, our serving vessels were essentially their bright tank. So you do all of your carbonation and serving out of those. But anyways, before you disconnect the beer line itself with that tri-clamp, you want to make sure that valve is closed, because I definitely made the mistake. Almost everybody in the industry has made the mistake where you disengage or unscrew that tri-clamp fitting, and all that pressure that's in that tank and the beer and yeast or whatever else is residually left behind will blast all over you. So definitely really important to make sure that you shut that valve. And then once you take that coupler and the beer line off, you rinse those and hang them out to dry. Make sure that they're not just sitting with moisture inside of them. And then the next step in the process, which I'm going to probably detail more, I mentioned doing it on the podcast, that I would do like a racking video, but I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't had the time to really sit down and record that, but I think I'll try to do that on my next racking day. But the next step in the process is to make sure that the CO2 is shut off that line that I had connected to the tank that was pressurizing it. I actually had shut that off on the last keg just because I didn't want to waste any more CO2. It had plenty of pressure to be able to finish emptying the tank, but you shut the CO2 off, and then you want to slowly bleed that CO2 pressure out of the tank. And this is all like if you're immediately going to be cleaning that tank or racking back into it or whatever, you want to address that first, is bleed that CO2 pressure off. And then once it's depressurized, you can drain off the rest of the liquid that's inside of the tank, and you can start taking the tank apart, cleaning it, running a CIP circuit, which I'll cover all this in another video. But yeah, that's pretty much it. A little wrap up to the video, and I hope you're enjoying this. This is fun to do, little actual segments on the brewing process and what I do in my tiny little brewery, and hopefully you can see things change over the next several months to several years as I start growing and scaling and adopt new practices and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions about the process or anything beer related, and I can maybe cover it in another video. So cheers, thanks for sticking with me and watching these videos.